Hi everyone, this is Lori from My File Addiction. This tip video was a request by one of my customers that was struggling with doing this particular design. So her first question was, why do designs feel better when they're made larger versus a smaller version? So we're going to cover that, and then I'm going to kind of show you how I would go about doing this particular design. I probably will not have time to do the complete design because you'll see when I kind of get into the process, it is going to be time consuming. And that's all a part of the process. It's okay that you've spent an hour or maybe 2 hours on the design cleaning it up. That's completely normal. We have to always remember that our programs, our Rhinestone programs, are designed to take what we've given them, and they try to do the best that they can in order to fill that object. But because there are so many inconsistencies in a drawing that we're starting with, it can't always fill an object or a design in 100% perfect. It's up to us to take that, what the program has given us, and decide how we want to clean that design up. Okay, that's probably one of the hardest things for people to kind of understand. They expect when we buy these design programs, they expect to take any kind of artwork, plug it in, push a button, and get these perfect designs. And that just does not happen. And in my experience, and I've been doing this for over 15 years, 99% of the time, I have to do some cleanup myself. Okay? And we've got to get that in our head, that just because this is what the program gave us, this is not how we want our finished design to look. Okay, so to answer the first question, so this is the part that she did herself. Okay, and we can see there's a whole lot kind of going on here. And she was saying, well, how come I can take this design and I can, increase it huge, make it really huge, and it looks so much better. Okay, so as you can see, as we're dragging this out, the design is clearing up quite a bit from the size that she originally wants it to be. Okay, again, this is not perfect. I know she did a linear fill, which a lot of people pick that fill because it does a good job of filling the inside. Unfortunately, it's the outline of the design that it really lacks that professional look. It's filling in a grid pattern, so when any design has a natural curve to it, just like this one does, this is where you get all these jagged lines, and to me, that's just not a professional touch. Okay, we want to keep the original shape. So unfortunately, when we do that, we have to pick the radial fill option, and sometimes it creates more of a cleanup for us. Okay, but in the end, after we've done our cleanup, it gives you a more professional look. So I have done a tip video, and I think it's tip number 3, where I have shown the fill of the same object done in multiple ways, and you can kind of see the finished product that I did. The radial fill gave the best looking finished design after I took the time to clean it up. because the radial fill is made to follow the outside of the design, which is, it's going to fill on this line right here. These are vector lines, and then it fills from the outside in. So when it does that, when you have designs with different thicknesses, when the two thicknesses collide, it creates gaps, okay? So when we're plugging in, say, we want a specific stone size and we want a certain spacing, once it does the best that it can as far as filling from the outside in, but when it runs out of room and it can't insert another stone based on the equation we have given them to work, the computer to work with, then it all of a sudden leaves a gap, okay? And that's completely and absolutely normal, okay? When people create the vector artwork, they don't care that this part of the S is a little thinner than this part of the S, okay? Visually, it kind of looks all about the same thickness, but you can see here it's a lot thinner than these lines, and same thing, it's thinner here versus here. If you were to cut this from vinyl, it wouldn't make a difference. But when we're creating we're turning this into a rhinestone design, that variance in thickness makes our job a lot harder, okay? So there are a couple different ways that we can go about this. I'm going to break this video up into 2 videos because there is a more advanced way of doing it, which is probably what I would more than likely do, because it gives it a more consistent look, okay? But I'm going to show you, if I had to work with just the rhinestone functions that a program has, I'm going to show you how I would do it in this video. And then the second video would be a more advanced, it's time consuming in the very beginning before the fill process, but you'll see you'll get so much better results and a little bit less cleanup at the end, okay? So, so the reason, like I said, the reason it fills in so much better is because when it's a larger, there's way more room to put more stones in, okay? A thicker area is going to fill a lot better than a thinner area. It's going to be more consistent, okay? Now if we change this over to, I believe she never released the rhinestones on this, so if we change this over to a radial fill, maybe, so, okay, now you can see there is some inconsistencies, okay? Because it's filling from, like I said, the outline, the outside in. So it has run out of room to lay those stones based on the spacing that she put in. And actually, I wonder if I think it's picking up my spacing. So let's see if we try to put in 0.25. Remember, I always say that we have to, it defaults to 0.039, but we have to manually change our spacing when we open up the program. So let's see if I change that spacing. Okay, so you can kind of see it cleared that up a little bit better because we put in a little bit tighter spacing. By no means is this perfect. Some people would look at it and say, you know what, it's good enough. But for me, if my eyes are drawn to certain areas, all of these little, if we zoom in here, you can see all of these are like, the spacing is kind of wonky. I don't know what's going on with this N, but those extra stones probably could be just deleted. But again, here you can see this part of the S, excuse me, is thicker, but then when it starts coming over here, where it's getting thinner, that's where it's having issues. So all of these would have to be kind of respaced. Okay, so this would definitely take a lot longer to clean up, being a larger design, than working with the smaller design. But still, it would take a lot of time to clean up. So that is the reason. And also, if you take this and say you wanted, right now she wants it to be about 9.5 by 7.5 inches, but say you wanted to bring this down to, maybe a small pocket kind of design. As you can see, the smaller that this design gets, the program is having a difficult time forming and keeping those details. Okay, just because there's less stones for smaller designs. So when there's less stones, it's harder to get smaller details. Now, if you change this over to an SS6 size, it might give you a little bit better details, because there's a few more, you can get more rows of stones using a smaller stone size. That's why you always have to kind of keep an open mind and say not everything is going to work with an SS10. And that's the size that everybody wants to use. But sometimes it just won't work. It's like putting a square peg in a round hole. You can only do so much with a fixed size object, which is the stone size. And in order to get smaller and greater detail, you have to go sometimes smaller. And that's just the case. And if you don't want to, then you have to kind of sometimes have to say that I just can't do it. But that's the reason that you get so many different looks based on the size that you want it to be, and all the information that you have plugged in, using a certain spacing, and also your fixed size, your stone size, which is your fixed size object. Okay, so let's go back, and I'm going to delete these. Okay, so I've gone ahead and this is the traced version. Okay, so in my other videos, I always say keep a copy. Okay, so we're going to keep this as a reference. Okay, this is our original. We're not gonna touch it. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I am going to break this design up. Okay, everybody wants to stone a design as one object. I've always looked at a design as these are all individual pieces. So each individual piece should be stoned separately. And the reason sometimes you want to go about that is because sometimes, like this L, because it is kind of, you can see it in her version, the L is probably the only thing that's stoned well. The rest of it I would not use. Okay, so sometimes we can use multiple fill options for different parts of the design. Okay, you don't have to always pick one fill option and use it for the entire design. So when we break our design up, we are allowed to pick for each piece and how we want it filled, okay? So the L would probably be the only piece in this entire design I would use the linear fill on, because it has a flat line on the going up and down on a vertical line, and it has a flat line for horizontal. Now if you zoomed in here, because the ALT is supposed to kind of take on the arched shape of this S, and you can see the EPA is taking on the shape of the arched P down here. It isn't a true flat line, okay? But to the naked eye, it's really not going to make a huge difference after we stone it, okay? So if we made that a flat line. Sometimes we have to vary from our original artwork in order to make things work. And the problem with our programs, it doesn't vary from the original artwork. It is programmed to follow these lines, okay, and fill in this area. And sometimes that just doesn't work. So sometimes in order for us to make it work, we have to go outside the perimeter of our object that we're going to fill in, okay? So there is another thing that we as the designer have to manually make it happen, okay? And we can make it look good, and the program just can't, because it's working only within this area to try to fill it in. So when somebody picks a linear fill, basically a linear fill is like this. So if you were to fill in a box, it would just make rows and rows and rows. Okay, it would fill exactly like this. This is a linear fill, except for the problem, it would cut it off where the outside edge of the object is, which is the vector line. So it stays within that perimeter, okay? Now, if you take this linear fill and you put it on an arch design, this is what you get, okay? So see, this is where you get this happening, because it fills based on it, you know, the line started here, so these circles within this area here would touch that line, and then it would cut these off. So you get this kind of a shape. So as the next line, it would say, okay, it touches here and it touches here, so I'm going to create a line here. Okay, so this is basically what the program is doing, okay? And this is why you are getting this grid type look. Sure, the center looks lovely. It's very consistent. The stones are, you know, evenly spaced, but it just lacks that nice smooth arch, okay? So the linear fill is just really not one that you really need to select, like I said, unless you're filling in a box. If you're filling in a box and all four sides are flat lines, those objects, yes, you can try to use your linear fill again, because the artwork is something that, you know, somebody maybe hand drew, or even if they did it with a design program, they're not always going to be make sure that the distances are evenly from this end to this end, or from top to bottom, but we can possibly work with that, okay? So we are, this definitely would not be a design that we would choose for a linear fill. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to break this design up. Okay, so we are going to release our compound path. So as you can see, when you release your compound path, you lose the center of letters. So anything that had a center to it, a closed-in object, you now will have to go through and select each object, and you're going to have to make compound path, and that brings that back. Okay, so that's just the way it is, but it's not life-threatening. Okay, so we're going to go through and we are going to make compound path on those. So I'm going to start deleting a few of these things. I'm going to keep this because, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to make another copy just to show you. Okay, so the next thing that happens is, when we run these through our trace programs, when you zoom out and you look at this design, you think that these are kind of nice smooth lines, okay? But when we zoom in, we can see all these little bumps, okay? All these little bumps in the trace. Okay, these trace programs are not perfect, and it does the best that it can based on the original artwork, and that is a lot of times very grainy. Okay, so the lower quality the original image was that you traced, the more bumps you're going to have in this design. Okay, I used to give, people would give me such poor quality images to work with, and the trace was just absolutely horrific. And a lot of these bumps and in this design will create inconsistencies and gaps in your fill, okay? And people don't realize that, but when that the Rhinestone program is trying to lay circles on this line, it sees these little bumps as kind of little breaks. So that's where sometimes you'll see that you maybe a stone has left, there was a gap, and it's like, why did it all of a sudden have a break in the path, the way the stones were laid? It's because of these, this bumpy outline. So we can try to clean that up. Okay, so if we were to double click on this and we're into our point editing mode, okay, all of these little bumps are nodes. Okay, the more nodes you have, it gets more detail, so it's creating all those little bumps. So what we want to do is we basically want to kind of try to reduce all those nodes, and we do this by let's see, I were to, let's see, oh no, okay, so if I double click on this and it brings up our point editing, if we go into simplify and we click on that, now we can see that it has reduced the amount of nodes. So it has kind of tried to smooth that out as much as possible. And sometimes I will go in and I will manually smooth it out even more to try to avoid any issues that once I lay my stones that it may cause. Okay, so sometimes if you get that inconsistency or that break in the spacing, it's because that area still needed to kind of be cleaned up a little bit. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're just going to try and see how the stones. So far We've only done the S, okay? So remember, each letter now is its own object. So if you're going to simplify this, the S and the P, we have to do that process to every single piece of the design, okay? So, but we will kind of take that one letter at a time. Okay, so let's just compare and see how this would, this S is going to stone, yeah, okay, let's go back. Control Z, we'll go back. I want to see how this S and this S will, just by simplifying it, how it's going to stone. So if we go to, I'm going to put that over there. And let's do our spacing is 0.025. We're going to click on an SS10 stone, and we're going to click the end radial fill. And that's what we get, okay? So now if I go over to this one, this is the one that had all the little nodes, okay? So it's got the bumpy line. And I click on that. And that still did a pretty good job, okay? But I've actually seen it before where it has, you know, like say, for instance, you know, this stone might have been missing, okay? So it's something, obviously you can try to stone first to see if it makes a difference. It kind of almost looks like it stone almost the same. This one, it kind of did a little bit more jagged in here versus here. So everything kind of looks just about the same, okay? But if your original artwork and some of those lines were really, really jagged, try and do the simplified to see if you can get, you know, a smoother outline and get your stones to lay more consistent. So actually, you know what? See, here's the gap that I'm talking about, and this is the one I actually simplified, okay? So it created a gap here. So this gap is not something that I would leave in there. So that means I would have to re-space a good portion of this line. And since this one did not do that, I can't see where there's any gaps other than, you know, inside the inside part. So I probably would take this one over this one, okay? And if I go back, let's see if I go back. I want to see what it was right kind of in this area. So it has to do with this particular node here was creating this gap, okay? I'm not sure why, and maybe if we actually smooth that out a little bit, maybe try to do something like this. Let's see if I do that, and then it teeters that one. So next, I probably would have to click on this. I would have to make that maybe a corner. That way I can adjust this one. So if I adjusted that one, let's see if I could get rid of that gap. Okay, see, by adjusting that one node, I was able to get rid of that gap. So, let's see. Okay, so since I was able to get rid of the gap, I'm going to make sure there's no more gaps in this version on the outside. Okay, there's not. So that means that I don't have to use this version over here. Okay. So I'm going to turn this part, and I'm just going to make it red. Okay. Okay, so the next part of our lettering is going to be, like I said, we can try to do this L, and this would be the only one that I would select the linear fill on. See, and even in my version, compared to what my customer did, the L did not turn out, it didn't turn out the same. Maybe she deleted, it's possible she deleted these two stones. That's the only thing I can maybe think of that might have happened. Or the program just didn't place these two stones. Since she didn't release these, and it's still in the Rhinestone mode, then chances are the program did not put these two stones down here. Okay. So that absolutely we could use this, and then we could clean it up and do and just delete those. Now the T, you say, okay, well, it has flat lines on here and up here and here. The problem with this T is it's going on a slant, okay, to try to mimic the curve of the top part of the S. So when I say it needs to be flat, it needs to be flat all the way horizontally, okay, and kind of like the top of this L was horizontally flat. This to me is it's going on a slant, so a linear fill is not going to work with this. Oops, sorry, that's this one. See, this is where it creates like this, okay, because it's taking the, that straight line that I showed you, that row of stones, and it's saying, okay, it touched the top part of the T here in the corner, and then the next row it's going to cut down a little bit here and here and here and so on and so forth. It did a good job here, but again, our T is not going to be flat, okay? It has to be on a slant because it's mimicking the roundness, the curve of the S. So now we have to go over to our radial fill. And the radial fill obviously is not the nicer looking, okay, for the inside, but it has gone around the shape of the T, so this is giving us something to work with, and that's what we have to do. Okay, and there's no gaps in here, so we don't have to simplify and go back and simplify that T to get rid of some of those nodes. I'm going to do the radial fill on this one. Okay, as you can see, this A, not the best looking A, okay, and that's fine. It's not perfect, and this is where we're going to have to go in and try to clean it up ourselves. But I'm going to backtrack here, and I'm going to see if I simplify that, if I can get any better results. So I'm going to double click on this, and as you can see, when you see all these dark, these are all tiny nodes. The only straight line was this one, okay? So let's simplify it. Now we've reduced it down. And I'm going to try our radial fill on this. And we still kind of get the same results, okay? But we can Control Z. I can go in, and I'm going to try to see if I can get a little bit better here by editing some of my nodes. Okay, so sometimes just making a few edits, and I'm going to click on this node here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to make it, okay, it is a corner already. So I'm going to see if I can make this, I'm going to make this one a corner. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to space this out a little bit more here. Bring that in so it's a straight, I try to get a straight line. This one I'm going to bring out a little bit. Try to get that to where it looks like a corner. Okay, so some of these are rounded. Oops. And we're going to try to make these, we're still keeping our slant. We're going to try to get these to more straight lines. Okay, see if it makes a difference. That's a corner piece already. So I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to bring it down just a tad. Take this and straighten that line up. To straighten that line up, I'm probably going to go in, and we don't need that. Oops, we don't need that node right there. When you want a straight line, you can go from corner to corner and delete all the nodes in between. Okay, that will create more of a straight line. Let's see. So let's see here. See, these probably all could stone a little bit better if these were more of a corner. Corner and make that, try to get that as straight as possible. So I don't know if any of this is going to make any difference, but sometimes just tweaking our lines a little bit can possibly help. So I can see here the distance between here and here is going to be, I can probably get rid of that node, and I can bring, trying to mimic this line and this line and kind of keep them on the same. Let's see if that makes a difference or not. Don't know if it will or not, but we'll give it a shot. And let's do a radial fill. Nope, didn't really make a difference. Okay, it's still, it's the amount of, it's the thickness of, it's the thickness of these lines. Okay, see here, the T was a little bit probably thicker where 4 stones could go across. This would actually, this part is going to have to be brought in order for us to get 4 lines. Okay, so it is what it is, and we're just going to have to work with that, and I'll show you how I would clean it up. Okay. So then, so you would do this for every single letter. And we're just going to do radial fill, radial fill, radial fill. Okay. So the wonderful thing also about doing our designs in pieces versus all together is sometimes two areas that we're stoning, and if you're using all one stone color, sometimes the pieces are too close together. Okay. We got to realize that, you know, when we are creating a rhinestone design, you are naturally leaving spacing between the stones. Okay, you have to do that for your template material so you can cut, you know, the template without it tearing. When the two areas meet, when the program is stoning the areas, you know, it's laying, like I said, starting from the outline here. Okay, so if you were to take, let's see, I dropped a stone and I put it over here. So if you were manually, you know, drop a circle, a lot of times I like to do this sometimes even before I've actually stoned anything. I'd like to sometimes take it and see if I were to, you know, drop the program's going to naturally do it on this line, just like it naturally did it on this line. If there's not enough spacing between these two areas, especially if you're using one stone color, it's going to be harder to tell those two design areas apart, okay? Because there's just not a huge amount of spacing between the two. Now, obviously, if you did this, say red, and you did this area crystal, okay, the colors define the areas. But one color, a single color, the spacing has to define the area. So sometimes what we have to do, and if you do it, you know, as a individual pieces versus all one design, it gives you the ability to adjust the size of certain pieces. Okay. So when I'm going to change this just to, I'm going to change this to, let's say green. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do it red first, just so you can kind of see. Just because I'm mimicking where the color of the S and P. Okay, so just for the sake of it, I'm just gonna pull this. Oops, a little bit more like this, just to kind of show you what happens. Okay, so if I take this and I do our radial fill, so as you can see, the N kind of blends right in with the, okay, so you definitely would not want this. Now, if it's a completely different, like I said, if it's a completely different color, okay, that N stands out, you could have it that close and it wouldn't be an issue. But you definitely do not want that using one stone color. So you have the ability, because this is now a separate piece, you have the ability to change the size of that. You can, since you're in the rhinestone mode, you can resize it like that, and then you could just take this and respace it. You could do it from the corner, which is going to change both the height and the width. So I would probably do something along the lines of that. Okay. So the outside of our end stoned well, so we didn't have to simplify that shape to kind of smooth out those lines. It did a pretty good job of doing that. Okay, so now, so this is basically what we have to work with, starting what we have to work with. If I were to change this all to red, well, let's change it all to black. Okay, so by no means not a perfect design, okay? And again, this is absolutely normal for this to happen, okay? It is what it is. So now we have to go in and now we have to clean up our design. And a design like this, to clean it up from start to finish, probably will take anywhere between 1 to 2 hours to do. I'm going to be honest with you, it's not going to be an easy process. And that is just the way it is. This is the nature of creating a quality rhinestone design. It's not always just quick, simple, click, I'm done, and I'm going to give this to my customer. Okay? I can guarantee if you gave that to your customer, they probably would say, what is this, you know? Same thing with this other one. You know, if you were going for maybe a drip effect or something like that, maybe, you know, this would be, let's see if I can turn this to black. Okay, so that's what it looks like filled in. So neither one of these I would absolutely not give to my customer, okay? I would take the time to fill or to clean this up, and that means manually moving things around, okay? And like I said, I am not, you know, this is a teaching video, so I spend a lot of time, you know, showing you different things. So for me to actually do this entire design and to add another hour or two onto the video itself, it would be a very, very time consuming video for you guys to even watch, okay? So I'm going to touch base on what I would do in certain areas, and those are areas that you are just going to have to apply to your entire project, okay? You have to just kind of break down each piece of the puzzle and work with that. And I'm just going to kind of show you tips that I would use, and you just have to kind of think outside the box, okay? This is where you need to put your design skills to the test. Okay, so where to start? I would not release rhinestones for the entire design at first, okay? I would do it piece by piece, because once you release the rhinestones, you can't put them back, okay? So if you need to make any adjustments, like we made an adjustment on this N, I want to make sure that this adjustment that we need to make is going to fit in the end. So probably because this is enclosed inside the S and the P, I am going to probably leave this to the very last and the end to do. Okay, I'm going to start with the lettering first, okay? So the reason that I always keep a master copy of what we started with is because you are going to use that as your guide, okay? Your program takes this piece away when it replaces the stones. Not all programs do that. The program that I work in, it does not. I think I have the option of removing the original artwork, but I have it where it stays. So basically my artwork is behind excuse me, is behind my piece. So, or I'm sorry, it was behind the area that the stones were laid. The program laid the stones. Sorry. So now what we need to do is we need to come in here and we need to put this behind it. Okay, so we are going to use this as a guide. Oops. And we are going to right click on this and I'm going to say send to back. Okay, so now we can see areas that need to be filled in. I think in the very beginning I also forgot to mention how important it is to kind of start off with your design when it's in this stage. You want to kind of start with the sizing that you want the design to be, because this will also give you an idea of, you know, how many stones that you're going to be able, how many stones will fit into a certain area. Okay, so if you start off with a really huge design or even a really small design, your outcome's going to be a lot different, and your original artwork is not going to match what what the program stoned. Okay, so then you're going to have to try to resize this in order to match the stoned version. Okay, so the only area that I did resize was the end. So the end is going to be a little off. Okay, but again, if we break this down, we can actually, you know, resize that. And if we had to, I don't think we will, because we're just going to be cleaning up the inside. The outside of the end stoned very well, so you don't really need to use that as a guide. Okay, so to kind of get back on track. Okay, so the problem that I see, and this is kind of when you're new to doing rhinestone designs, the inconsistency of thicknesses in certain areas, especially when it comes to lettering. I'm a person that likes to try to keep letters a certain thickness throughout the entire design. Sometimes you can't do it based on the type of lettering. See, like this one gets a little condensed because it's being kind of it's being basically shaped to mimic, like I said, the arch of this P. Okay, so things do kind of get a little bit smushed a little bit here, get more condensed. And see, in this one, the T is a little bit thicker, So this one's going to have 4 rows. This one, the L over here would have 4 rows. But this A, we probably won't be able to get 4 rows. So I'm a person, like I said, I like to visually see that all of my letters kind of match. So I don't think I necessarily would do this A as 3 rows, this is 4 rows, this is 4 rows. Down here, it's going to be 3 rows. All of these are going to be 3 rows. So even though this T kind of stoned well with 4 rows, I'm probably going to remove a row of stones and reduce it down to 3 rows. Same thing with the L. I'm going to reduce this down to 3 rows too. That way, visually, all of my letters are going to be consistent in the number of rows for the thickness. Like I said, this is something that, when you're new to rhinestones, you don't sometimes think of those kind of details, but because I've been doing this for so many years, that's just my thought process. I just want to make sure everything can kind of be consistent as possible. Okay, so let's take this letter A up here. I'm going to use my outside. We're going to have to release our rhinestones here. And what I'm going to do is I am going to change this to another color. I'm going to change this to orange. Okay. Another thing that might be helpful to bring up is your color palette, your select by color at the top here. I've mentioned in various videos that I like to design in different colors. And the reason is if I need to go back to this A and I need to select all of those circles to maybe shift and move that A around, it's easier to select by color and grab all those than trying to get a box around a slanted object without trying to select any of the other circles in this design. Okay. I've also mentioned in my other videos, sometimes there's a delayed process. You can kind of see that this orange has not showed up. And maybe it's, oh, okay, sorry. Sometimes there could be a delay. So I didn't have this bifill selected. But if you change this to orange and then you brought up this box and you selected your bifill, sometimes the color that you just selected the item to be won't necessarily pop up right away. Sometimes there's a bit of a delay. But I like to have this box up because this shows me the colors that I've already used that are on my color palette. So if I duplicated and made this blue, whatever item was here in my workspace area that's blue, and if I were to select that, it would also select that blue object. So the blue object, I think was actually this one stone that I dropped here. So I could actually delete that and it will eventually take this blue out of ACC. It just removed it. So right now we have used, and the red is probably, let's see, the red might be, the red is actually this line that I drew here. So I could change that to yellow or even black. So that kind of frees up. Why isn't it? Oops, I need to change it over here to black. So that will free up for me to change something to red, to use the color red if I need to. Okay, so right now we have yellow, orange, and black as our color palette that we've used. I'm going to show you kind of what Okay, so this is broken up, so now we're able to select individual circles, okay? So what we kind of need to do here is the program took this A and it said, okay, I'm going to lay a stone on this corner of the A and this corner of the A. So it created one in the center, but as you can see, there's going to be quite a big gap between these stones if we were to follow this row and try to fill in this A. I don't like to see big gaps as if we can help it. Sometimes it has to be what it has to be because you're trying to use all one stone color. But when you are working with just very few rows of stones, you can remove those gaps. But it's, again, something you're manually going to have to do yourself. So what I would do is I would take and I would actually delete all of these circles. You know what? Here, hold on. I'm going to Control Z. Control Z. I'm going to, before I make any changes to this, I want to select this and make a copy of it, just so we can see the areas we've cleaned up and how those change, how we've made a difference in this design. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to go in and I'm going to delete, and I'm going to delete these rows. What I'm going to do is, these are all nice and evenly spaced. I'm going to select them. I'm going to hold down my Alt key and I'm going to duplicate this row, and I'm going to make those stones visually closer together. So see, when I talk about we have to work outside the perimeter of what the program has laid the stones, or outside the perimeter of the object that we are trying to fill, as you can see now, the program laid the stone over here on this corner. Now by manually moving and creating that space, we have made a impact on the spacing that is now between those stones. Okay, now this is going to visually look a lot nicer because the stone spacing is consistent and there's not that huge wide gap between the stones. Okay, so this one probably could be moved over just a tad bit more. But we have, already made a huge improvement on that A by just doing something like that. So we're going to do it on the other side also. I'm going to take this line, and now, see, this is where it would have laid the circle, and I'm going to take this, put it here, and I'm going to put it here. So now these stones will get deleted. So now then we're going to take this, and I'm going to take those. So you can manually do some adjusting, or sometimes you bring up, I'm going to put this over here. When you are designing, the number one panel you should always have up is your transform panel. Okay, This allows you to straighten lines, and this allows you to respace horizontally and vertically. Okay, so if you were to grab this group of circles, now sometimes it works when it's the circles are on a slight angle. This would be considered a horizontal line. So I would respace these, and as you can see, it worked. It worked pretty well. What it kind of did is it shifted this row down just a little bit, but for the most part, it did a pretty good job of respacing all those stones out. So we could take this, select, and I'm only going to select to this point. I want to respace between this circle and this circle. So I'm going to do horizontal again. So as you can tell, it shifted those down a little bit, but we can, oops, we could take these 3 circles and move them up a little bit. Okay. So what I would probably do here, now we have a gap here, so I would take this circle, I would move it up, and I would select all of these circles, and I would respace them vertically. Okay. So now we need to do our horizontal bar here between in the center of the A. And we could, sorry, that's my cat. It's feeding time, so I might have to pause this video and come back to it. But let's see here. We'll see how far I can get before they get annoying. So I'm going to select these 3 circles up here, and I'm going to see if I can use them. I'm going to select my Alt key, and I'm going to bring these down, and I'm going to see if I can use these to create that line. Okay. So we want to mimic them being a little bit on an angle because, again, this A is not perfectly flat. So I probably would take this line, probably shift it just a little bit. And then I'm going to go in here, respace these. Space these. Oops. See? These are probably pretty spaced evenly, but let's go back in and just double check that. Okay, see, they shifted over a little bit, so they weren't perfectly spaced, but visually they kind of looked pretty good. So now we take this A, and I'm going to select that and make a copy of it. I'm going to bring it up here. And now we're going to compare it to the way it visually looked when we placed our stones. Okay, so that one is orange, so I can't. Okay, so see, that's what I mean. Probably in order to select this, we have to go in and make it, let's make it green. I'm just trying to be able to pull this A as one piece out of this design, and I can't do it because if I pick the same color as the orange that I made a copy of. Oops. to be an easier way to do this, but okay. So now I can select that A. Oops. Should be able to select by color. Why isn't it selecting those? I don't know why it's not selecting those circles. Oh, I have two different greens for one thing. Okay. This is not working the way I wanted it to, but instead of spending a huge amount of time on this, I'm going to just do this. Sorry, I don't mean to go kind of all over the place. The zooming on this program is so different than the zooming on my program. Okay, so these were our visually our A's that we worked, this is the way it looks. So see, this is so much clearer and so much nicer because we took the time to make sure our spacing was nice and tight as possible. I can guarantee if we would have just followed the spacing and left this gap here, this A would look, it wouldn't look as clear as this version here, okay? So by manually, adjusting our spacing and bringing those lines closer together, we're able to make that clearer looking. We got to remember, the closer the stones, the more solid the object will look and the clearer it will look. Having bigger spacing between your stones will allow that shirt color or the object that the material that you're putting the finished transfer on, allowing that fabric to show through is going to take away and pull away from the design, especially when you have a lighter color fabric. White is probably one of the, in my honest opinion, the worst colors you could use for a shirt color, and it's going to mute your design. So if your design has a lot of open gaps and it doesn't look solid, it's going to be more difficult to visually see that design on a white shirt than it would be to put it on a black shirt. The darker colors don't pop out as much in between those stone colors, so visually it allows you to actually see your design better as long as you're using the right stone colors. Obviously, if you're using darker stone colors on a darker design, you would have to outline it in a brighter, lighter color in order to define that area that you were stoning. Okay, so that's what I would do with that particular part of the design. Okay, so let's go on to what we're going to do with the L and the T here. Like I said, I am all about kind of keeping things consistent, and since we did 3 rows here, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete one of these rows of stones. Oops, I forgot, I gotta release my stones. I'm going to make, let's see, I'm gonna make this letter blue. I'm gonna release my rhinestones here. I'm gonna delete these 2. Probably do this. And I'll probably do something. So the problem is gonna make the L a little bit shorter. I'm all about things being certain height also, because you want this to kind of flow from one letter to the next. So what we might have to do is bring this row up, because I want it to visually kind of go into this, and then I'm going to take these and we are going to respace them. Now I want this part of the L to flow into these 3 stones, okay? So what I might do is try to see if I can create that little bit of a arch effect. And I'm just taking and rotating this group of circles a little bit here. This I have to bring up like this. This row I'm going to respace like that, and all of these I'm going to bring in just a tad bit closer. I think I'm going to these circles closer together. Too much of a gap. See, I could have grabbed a row and horizontally respaced, or sometimes you can just grab if you know there's a, I can just manually do it, but I'm doing 3 rows at a time basically. So let's see how this one looks a little off. Okay. See that one, when I looked at straight lines, this particular one was shifted over to the left a little bit. So all I did was try to line it up with the one underneath it to create straight lines, and then I respaced them. Probably could have done this with the A also if I wanted this to be could have done that if I want a square, more of a square edge. And then I can grab these stones and horizontally respace. On an angle, I'm just going to bring them up just a little bit because it kind of made them a little wonky. So sometimes you go back to certain areas and I'm like, oh, okay, that could be tweaked a little bit. I'm not afraid to go back and tweak things. And you'll see that in a lot of my videos. I will go back and work on it till it visually looks correct to me. Okay, so I think that L kind of looks nice. It's kind of mimicking that a little bit of that arch. Probably could tip this a little bit. Okay. So see, now I'm not working within the size of the original L. Okay, but visually it's 3 rows here, 3 rows here. So that's the kind of the theme that I'm gonna try to work with. Okay, so we know we are going to have to reduce this down to 3 rows. So I'm going to work from the top of the T and kind of go down because this is 4 rows for that too, for the thickness, and we've kind of changed everything to 3 rows. So I am going to, you know what I'm going to do too is I'm going to take these and I'm going to do Control G and I'm going to group them because you know what, sometimes it'll make it easier to select that, Control G, and now if I want to select this letter I can, or I could even change this to orange because now I can select anywhere on this letter because I grouped all the circles and I'm going to move the entire batch at one time because sometimes we will run out of colors here. Okay, so we are going to start with the top of the T here. I am going to let's change this to make it brown. I'm going to release my stones and I am going to I am going to do this. Okay, so the reason I released or I deleted all those stones is because I'm going to take this entire row and all I'm going to do is select my Alt and I'm going to duplicate it. Keep it on an angle. Okay. So those stones. Okay. So now what I will do is I'm going to delete everything in here. Stones. Okay, so now we have 3 stones over here and we have 4 stones over here. So these 3 are definitely not centered, okay? So if we want our T to be balanced, we either shorten it up, we would remove a row of stones here, which I think I'm probably going to do. So if I did that, then these 3 stones would be centered. If you decided you wanted it this length, which let's try that first. Hold down my Alt key. Then that means your circles have to be off center. So instead of lining it directly underneath, you would go over half of a circle and you would, that way it's 3.5 circles over here, 3.5 circles over here. So now these are centered because they're off centered between these 4 circles, and if that makes sense. And what I'm going to do is we can also use our replicate panel. Let's try this here. Our advanced replicate. So we are going to go into find my little cheat sheet here. No, didn't. Don't have my cheat sheet handy at the moment, so I don't know what my X and Y should be, but let's just kind of wing it. Okay, so we're going to go into the second option. We go into the bent arrow and our X offset, and we have a Y offset. So the X offset, I believe, does horizontally, replicates, and I think the Y does vertically. So if we want to do, if we do a positive 0.155, which is the size of the circle, 0.13 inches, by our spacing, which is 0.025, we end up with a number of 0.155. Positive number will offset in one direction. If you put a negative sign in front of that number, it will offset in the other opposite direction. So I think a positive number will offset down. So let me, yep, okay. So now what we can do is we can do that, and now we have created our T. It's visually off a little bit here, but let's see when we look back. It's still following the curve, the natural curve of the letters, so I think it's going to be visually fine when we're done. That we don't have, I think because of that fourth row that it possibly could fit in, it would end up more, the fourth circle would end up more here, and it would kind of go up, so it would follow that line. But because we're not exactly using the same amount of stones as the program put in there, it's going to visually look a little bit different. But we will kind of see once we pull that out. If I select that, if I hit Control G, I group them. And I do often do this. You pull your pieces away from your design to look at them, okay? This is not something I'm just doing for the video. I do this all the time. I will put a black background around the pieces to see how they visually look. So I would say, even though this doesn't exactly mimic the same T, I would say this would be okay to do. Now, there is a lot of spacing right here, so either we visually, we bring this in a little bit, or we could make that part of the L longer. The one that I deleted these stones because I thought maybe it would look too long, but that's a possibility. To go back in there and fill in that gap. So I'm going to, when I release the stones, I always pick a new color so I can grab them all again. So I'm going to do Control Shift G. It will really ungroup the stones. I think I hit freehand. So I'm going to go in and add just one more row of stones. I'm going to put it on a slight angle because I'm still going to try to follow the arched look. So if I select, that one didn't show up. Don't know if I don't know if the problem also is there's only so many colors that possibly will show up in this box here. I'm going to delete this green A. Okay, so now the blue showed up here. Okay, so if I hit that, selects that, group those circles. Now if I pull this, select those, bring them up here, change them all to one color. Still think there's a little too much spacing, but when you're putting an L and a T together, you will create, there will be a larger gap, just because, you know, there's nothing in this area and there's nothing in this area for these two letters. So sometimes I overlap them a little bit, and I try to mimic the spacing between here and here. Okay, but you can see it overlaps. So I think that looks so much better. Those three letters look so much better than what we started off with. Okay, which is our design over here. Okay, so, but again, the program did not do this. I'm the one that did this. Okay, so to get to this is a little bit of hard work, but it can be done. Okay, so I'm not going to I'm going to move on to just like showing you how to clean up some of the S and the P. You know, these letters, basically it would be the same exact thing as what we did up here. You're just manually going to have to you know, remove these stones in here, use these outer lines, duplicate them to the center of the letters, and start, you know, manually filling in your spaces and to clean up these letters. Okay, so as you can see, I'm going to change this to just make this red. Okay, so there's no measurement tool in this program, so a lot of times when I want to see what the size of something is, you can draw a square or rectangle and then just smash it together and create a line. Okay, this will give you a visual distance. So this line is just a little over 1 inch tall. It's 1.009. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of show you. I'm going to also rotate this. Okay, so you have certain areas of the S, or part of the top of the P, they're morphed together. But some of them are this thickness, and then you go over areas over here, and it's a little bit thinner, okay? And then you go to, you know, an area like this, and it's a little thinner yet. Like I said, whoever designed this artwork did not care that these areas were the same thickness. But for our program, it gets so confused. It gets confused when it goes from thick areas to thin areas. And that's when it starts leaving all of these gaps, because it's like, or it starts doing something like this. It's like, oh, okay, if you alternate stones, I could get two in there, but if I place them directly on top of each other, you can't get two stones in there. Okay, so it takes up less space to do a zigzag like this than this straight up and down. Okay, so our program is all about figuring out a mathematical equation. But it's not about saying, okay, I have this open area, how can I perfectly lay those stones in there so it perfectly fills them? That's not what it does. That's what we have to do. Okay, so that's where we have to start cleaning up our design. There's two ways to go about it, basically. If you only want to work with one stone size, then it's all about trying to respace those stones to visually hide the gap. You're creating sometimes a larger gap between your stones. See, it's nice and tight and even, it's 0.025 all the way here. But if we have to eliminate, because we cannot put two more stones in here that are equally distanced, that 0.025, and since we're at our minimum here, or I should say our maximum of the spacing that we need, we don't want it to be any tighter because we have potentially our template material can tear. We are going to essentially have to create looser spacing to try to hide those gaps if you want to use one stone size. The second option is filling in with a different stone size along with the SS10. Whenever you insert a second stone size, it has to be done manually. It's like figuring out a puzzle. That's all I can kind of relate it to. It's a lot of trial and error to see what stone size or what number of stone sizes are going to work in a certain area. And those are very time consuming designs, but when you visually look at it, it's all consistently filled in. It makes it look like a solid design because you've filled in those little gaps. And it's funny because I see, the cup, everybody's hand placing and decorating cups and, license plate frames and, all different kinds of things. And they use all of those little filler stones to try to hide the spacing. Working with multiple stone sizes is exactly the same way when it comes to creating designs for a t-shirt template. Using a multitude of different stone sizes is visually going to give you a more consistent fill than just using one. So, but again, I know people don't like to use the smaller stone sizes when it comes to t-shirt designs. They don't have a problem with it when they're, using and hand placing those for cups and filling, doing cup designs. But for some reason, when it comes to t-shirt designs, everybody thinks that they should only use one stone size. And that's not sometimes what the best choice for filling in your object. So you have to kind of keep an open mind. So I'm going to go and I'm going to show you how I would rearrange some areas for if I was just filling in with an SS10 stone. And then I'm going to show you areas that if you were open to having another stone size, how you could go about doing that too. Okay, so we are going to, I'm going to just delete these, but if you ever want to kind of visually go around your design and check thicknesses and stuff like that, you can create the horizontal line here too, and essentially do the same thing, okay? I wish they had a little ruler in there, but they don't, so. Okay, so this particular area I'm going to show you on if we were to keep this all SS10 stones, okay? When you're doing your cleanup, it's real good to be zoomed in as close as you possibly can. It gives you better control over moving your circles around, visually seeing your spacing, And basically you're going to work in smaller sections anyway, so there's no reason to have to see the entire design all at one time. Okay, because I'm releasing the stones on this one, I am going to change this to another color. And I'm going to make it, I think I'm going to make it pink. Okay. So now I'm going to release my stones. The more stones you have to release, sometimes the longer it takes to process. Okay, so now they're all released. So visually you're going to work off of this kind of spacing, okay? You don't want it to be, you want to try to avoid, I should say, areas where your spacing would be any tighter than this. It is okay every once in a while to have stones that are close together or even overlapping slightly. I think I've showed this in another video, but I'm going to show it real quick here, just as a refresher. When we make a design to cut for a template, the circles that we create are actually larger than the actual stone sizes that we are actually working with, okay? So your circle has to cut slightly larger than your stone in order for that stone to fall into the hole more easily. If it was more of a true to size, it would be difficult for that stone to drop into it because it's just a tighter spacing, okay? So they're slightly larger. So a true stone size is more of a, let's change this to black. You know what, I don't think is it going to let me, it won't let me resize this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I am going to go to my shapes and I'm going to drop a circle. Okay, in inches, I don't know what the actual size is of a rhinestone, but just for the sake of just to show this as an example, you basically I zoom in. Your stone size is about the size of the black circle. So the pink circle is the hole that's being cut. So basically when this stone falls into the hole, you will see a slight gap between the stone in there and the hole for your template, okay? So if you had two stones that actually overlapped a little bit, you could actually still cut them like that, because here's one stone would fall in that hole and another stone would fall in that hole, and the two stones are still not touching, okay? So sometimes it's better to actually create an overlap, because now this actually creates, it's going to cut, and this center section between these two stones is actually going to pull out. So when you cut your template, this whole pink area will be one section that would just be removed. Okay, so it's actually going to create a stronger bond. Okay, if you were to actually take and do something like this and have a separation, chances are this little area, when you go to weed your material, it's just going to tear. And when it tears, it's just going to, it could possibly tear up here, over here. This, when you overlap these, you're actually doing a more controlled, because your cutter is going to cut to this point here. come around and cut to this point here and come around. And this section here is just going to be, it will just completely pull out. So you're better off overlapping versus leaving a thin space like that, okay? And it's okay to do that here and there. You don't want your entire design to do that, because the less fabric or template material there is, the flimsier it gets, okay? But sometimes we have to do it that way in order to fill in the space. If you don't, then you just have this huge gap between stones, okay? So it's, you gotta pick and choose. Just pick and choose what you're gonna do. Okay. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take this. Now all I'm doing is I am holding down my Alt key, okay? And as long as you select the circle first, then you hold down, you can hold down your Alt key, you don't, and just click and drag. Click and drag. Okay, if you want to just move one, then you can lift your finger off of your Alt key. If you want to continuously manually duplicate something, all you have to do is hold your finger down on that Alt key. You don't have to keep you don't have to select it every single time you select a new circle. You are able to keep duplicating that, and it makes the process a lot faster. You know, the problem is we have to, you know, worry about these circles that are in there too. So sometimes, you know, either you go in and you delete all these, and then you manually duplicate by clicking and dragging, or, you know, you start with certain areas, you fill into what you can, move those circles around, and then any open gaps, then you would manually fill those circles in. So as you can kind of see, our spacing is getting a little tight here. So remember how I said if you alternate circles, see, I can fill in this gap, but I can't fill in the gap if I were to line these all up, okay? I can respace them, but now all of our circles are going to be, if I were to try to respace these, I don't know if I can do it on a, put this over here, vertical spacing, did a okay job. But let's see here. Sorry, I got distracted by my cat. Just trying to catch a bug on the outside of the door wall. I could possibly do something like this. Our spacing is going to be a little tighter in here. If we know that kind of going in, the key is trying to get these where they're off-centered and not stacked. Okay, that allows us a little bit more room to move things around and try to fit in that row. See, now this one, it ends up being, see, these are really close together. So there's only one little area that's a little tight over here. When I look at my spacing, I try to look in different directions. Like I will take all this as kind of one row, okay? So sometimes, and then I would look, you know, as this is one row. So there's tighter gap here. I'm sorry, looser gap here, tighter over here, but much I can do. I could possibly move these. I like that a little bit better. Okay, so now we're going over to another section here. Okay, so now we got a gap here. Let's zoom out a little bit here. Let's see what we're going into. Okay, so these are all kind of evenly spaced. I got a gap I need to close in here. Okay, and this gap right here, because I have no other gaps in this row here. This is where you can zoom out just to kind of see what other areas you need to have straightened out. So because this row is pretty evenly spaced, oh, I'm sorry, this row. This one's evenly spaced. All we can do is try to close in this gap by respacing a number of stones. When you do this, you want to grab quite a few stones, because if you were just to grab these 4 stones, it's only going to respace the ones in between. Okay, this stone and this stone is going to stay exactly where it's at, so it's only going to respace these 2. So it's still going to be kind of a more noticeable gap, but as you factor in more stones, then it divides that spacing out between more stones. So the gap isn't as kind of noticeable. So I'm going to select and do something like this. So this stone's going to stay where it's at, that one's going to stay where it's at, and then you should see these ones in between here shift. Okay, and because it was on a curve, it just shifted everything kind of over, but so now we're going to have to go in and manually adjust our spacing a little bit. And we could do that by doing, we just want to center this one. We can do that. Maybe that. Okay, so now we go back to that area. Now we've done a pretty good job of filling in that space. Okay, so now as we're shifting to the left here, now we can start seeing where the S is starting to get thicker, because these stones are now being in the center. There's more of a gap here. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to go in and recenter these rows in order to visually make them kind of the same distance apart to eliminate this one gap that you see. Again, anything that your eyes are visually drawn to are areas that need to be fixed, in my opinion. So let's go to, now it can be a bit of a challenge doing it when the stones are not lined straight up and down. On an angle, like I said, we have the ability to respace on a vertical line or horizontal line. But when stones are off on an angle, sometimes we get it doesn't respace them as nice. So sometimes we can use this tool, and sometimes we just have to visually do it ourselves. Okay. So let's try to see what our tool. See, now you could go down on this angle here, or I could actually, because this stone and this stone are almost lined up, I'm going to try to do a little bit of a jagged line here, and this might yield better results. Yeah, I think that might be a better option to do it as far as we can. The spacing's getting wider. I think I'm going to try and include the top and the bottom ones. I think that might give us better. Okay. I was originally just respacing these four in the center and leaving the two end ones out, but I think by including them, just because these two stones are still kind of lined up vertically, so that's why I can do it. And I think that adjusts the spacing a lot better. So like I said, we can do it to a certain point. When you're working with curved objects, it's definitely way more of a challenge than working with lines that are straight up and down. Some of these, see now, as the curve is starting to shift, now these two stones are not lined straight up on top of each other. Oh wait, actually, you know what? Sorry, I'm gonna do it with this one. I was thinking I had to do it with this one. So let's see here. So see, it's not working so well. It's still like this stone never moved. Maybe I didn't include it in my, let me try to see if maybe it didn't get, nope, okay. So now what we're gonna have to do is, I have to manually probably go in and start adjusting. business here. Okay, so now I'm trying to decide what to do. Stones were a little too close together here. Okay, so we might have room. What we need to try to do is, it's going to be too tight in order to insert, I think, all the way down by trying to line the stones up. Let's see what we've got going on down here. If this gets wider, okay, okay, so we only have to do that one small area. Possibly shift this row just a little bit. I think there's a little bit of wiggle room here. And then what we can try to do is duplicate, and then we will move that over like that. To manually respace these over. Now, if you felt that the gap is too short in here, the only way to kind of add back in more space would be to take this row of stones here and shift it to the right. So that's going to create more of a gap, and then you can space your stones further out. So you essentially would be taking this row of stones here and making this part of the S a little bit wider. Okay? So that's a possibility. You could do absolutely that too. And I'll just kind of show you an example of what I mean. The problem is you're going to sometimes you create a tighter gap. So if I shifted this over just a little bit, lined it up with this circle down here, now I've created a little bit more of a gap, and now if I respace these, I got a little bit more room that I can put between. Let's see. You got to remember too is this is a thicker part of the S, so these means these stones are going to be more spaced apart because there's not going to be another room. There's not enough space to create another row. So what I probably would do here is I would delete a stone here. bit more spaced apart, but I think that might be okay, so things aren't so cramped. Sometimes, you know, you make one change, it works on one area, but then it creates sometimes a whole nother problem down the road. That's because of the inconsistencies and thicknesses of these objects that we're filling. You know, if it was absolutely the same thickness all around, oh, it would be so much easier. But because it's not, we just have to do what works in that small space, and then we just have to fix the other issues as we come across them. So, as you can see, I'm going to go all the way down to this line, and then I'm going to jump to another area. So then we can take this, fill this in. Now, what we might have to do is do a little bit of respacing here. Got a gap going on here. So this row going up here, it's tighter up here. So basically, we want to take this row of stones here. See what I did? Kind of shifts everything over, so now I got to clean these up again. I'm just hitting my arrow key. I do all different kinds of things, so it's, you know, whatever works. Okay, so now you look back. Let's just do a quick review. So you can see all of this kind of, you zoom out, it all kind of looks a little bit tight spacing here. You could probably do the same thing over here if you wanted to. You just got to worry about that, bringing this down a little too far and then closing in the T spacing. but I'd just be very careful when you cut your template to make sure that you can, cut that kind of spacing, that close of a spacing, because if not, your only other option, and I hate to do this, but the only other option is to, create, your spacing is going to be like this, because you're taking, and you're removing a stone. So to me, that just, all that spacing just does not sit well with me. Again, it's your design, so, but chances are that more of that shirt color is going to show through, and it just kind of reflects the outcome of the way the design is going to look on the shirt if you do it that way. I'm going to put all these back. There we go. Okay. So this one, I'm going to show you this area. I'm just going to do from here over, and I'm going to show you if I were to use a smaller stone size. So when you drop a stone, actually I don't like to use the rhinestone panel. I would rather use a circle. Create a circle, select it, change it to 0.098 SS10, I'm sorry, SS6 stone, and then I like to convert it to path. If you leave it the other way, it's easier to grab it and resize it accidentally. This way it's a little easier to move it around when you have to, so that's the only reason. I found that out kind of after I started my tip videos, so I didn't do that in some earlier ones when I was dropping a circle, but just realized that it's easier to control this and select it when it's a smaller object. Okay, so if we decided to fill in some of these gaps with an SS6 stone instead of using all SS10s, I'm going to show you what you would do. When I design in a different stone size, I always make that a different stone color. It identifies it as a different size stone when I'm looking at my design. So I'm going to make that one purple. Okay, so in some of these areas where, like this particular line that I had to respace because I had a little gap there, a lot of times what you can do is you can fill those spots sometimes in with an SS6 stone, okay? So generally, when you put two SS10 stones together, they're going to be this thick, okay? Let's put 3 of them together. It's always going to be this thick because you got this kind of spacing. Well, when you put 3 SS6 stones together, you can fit into a tighter spacing. So you can almost fit, just a little over, but almost 4 stones in a space where you'd only put 3 SS10s. So when you are talking tighter spacing, sometimes you can, instead of, putting one here and having all these gaps, you can fit 2 SS6 stones in those spots. Okay, so let's do this. Let's put okay, so in this case, an SS10 would be too tight. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to put in my SS6. It's kind of, it's also, and besides it being like a puzzle, it's I kind of refer to it also as playing Tetris. That game where you have to try to put in shapes to fill the blank space. And that's kind of what it's like too. I'm just going to actually delete these. It's easier for me to duplicate. Okay, so again, we're going to kind of zoom into our space here. And I'm going to take that. And here, I can fill that in nicely with 2 SS6 stones. Doesn't always work out. Sometimes even, 2 SS6 stones can create and close in that gap. But, first thing you want to do is shift your stones around to see if you can, get them in there. But remember, because of the inconsistency in thickness, just because we can fit 2 here, doesn't necessarily mean the thickness that's this gap here is the same thickness. So sometimes 2 stones, SS6 stones would fit, but then it just starts getting tighter and tighter. So then we have to go back down to, maybe 1 single SS10 stone and then respace our stones. I'm just eyeballing the spacing, really. At this point, when you're manually laying these in here, that's what you have to do. It's not perfect. Again, it makes a difference whether you're trying to stack or you're creating, if this SS6 stone is falling in like the honeycomb pattern to the SS10s. It's not going to be consistent because this is a smaller stone, so sometimes it'll match up and then sometimes it ends up falling in between, so that allows, more of a gap. Yeah, so when I made custom designs for people, I don't anymore, but when I did, this is the reason I asked whether it was okay for me to use multiple stone sizes, because it's a matter of being able to, sometimes fill in these gaps using more than 1 stone size. Straight up and down. So now I can go back to using my vertical respacer. And respacing things a little bit more. I can come in here. space those a little bit. Lines won't be exactly perfect when you're just eyeballing it. Okay, so now we're going to start working more on a straight line, so it might be easier to grab two of these. And copy them at the same time. Yeah, because basically in this case, if you didn't do this you didn't use the SS6, this is what your spacing would end up being. Okay. So if you are okay with that, that's fine. Like I said, you have options. You just have to, play around with different things. And this would be, because something would be, like I said, more consistently a tighter spacing. But if you didn't want to, then you would, fill it in with one, just one SS10, and then have to go through and respace all these. But let's see. Let's just, for the sake of this part, I'm just gonna go back. Okay. Oops. Don't always feel like you have to copy and paste just one circle. You can grab a whole row and you want to duplicate that whole row, just grab it all and duplicate it. That would be so much faster if that's something that is definitely doable. Now our spacing is going to start getting a little tighter as we go in here, so then we'll have to transition from 2 stones, 2 SS6 down to 1. Let's see if we can fit 2 more in here. I'm not sure. I would say got a little bit of a gap up here. This probably last time we can do this. So then you would transition to 1 SS10. close to being done here. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. I know my videos can be long and time consuming to watch, but like I said, these are made to be teaching videos, so I think it's good to explain different things, because this is all part of the process. It's not a push the button and let's go. And this is just all stuff that I have just learned along the way. The more you get to playing around with your program and seeing the tools that, you know, different things that can be done, you will teach yourself all kinds of shortcuts. I'm sure somebody's looking at this video and saying, oh, she probably could have done that, or she could have done this, and that's all right. There's not always just one way to do something. I'm just showing you my way, okay? This is what I would do. Just respace these out a little bit, make them blend a little bit better. And I probably, because there's going to be this gap here, I probably would, if I was using SS6 stones, I would come in here. Maybe, nope, doesn't always work, but sometimes you can. Like I said, it's about, I know 2 stones could fit somewhere in there. Just trying to figure out which ones. Nope, that won't work. So let's see. Okay, so I could probably there. I didn't have to use the SS6. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And I didn't know until I tried a few different ways. So then I would continue right around, but yes, the purple sticks out. Let's see here. Okay. And like I said, with this N, if this looked too tight, you still could possibly, if you wanted to, before you released your stones, you know, you could bring this in if you wanted to make it more defined in this area. Oops, that was the wrong piece. And then you would just change your, you know, shape if you had to. Whoops. No. If you broke that apart and just changed your shape. But, you know, just take piece by piece. With these letters down here, because they come out a little bit further, I would, after I stone them, I would probably snuggle them a little bit closer and move these up a little bit, you know, to like this. Even they weren't like that in the original design, but you know what? Visually, it might look a little bit better. This is another area that, you either decide to move this out a little bit so you could actually add one more row of stones. Probably would be the easiest. You don't want to go too far out, because you got to remember, when you are looking at this design, this line up here and this line here should flow. You don't want to bring this row all the way out to this row, because now, you know what, this P is really thick here. Well, I guess unless you brought this one out too. Yeah, you would actually, if you're going to increase the width of this part down here, you may want to select, let's see, bring that out, and then you could actually bring these over and create enough of a gap in between here, copy a row, paste it in here, and you could easily fill in that gap. This, again, you could fill in with SS6 stones, or if not, then you would select something might work first. That's going to probably be too tight a spacing, but you can also do this when you're filling in. If you off center, only works to a certain area, but you can actually do something like that too. And then see, it gets tighter in here. So this is where this ideally probably an SS6 stone would work in this area. If not, then you are going to have to stop at that point and respace these stones. And now you have this area that's tight, but now this area is loose. Okay, so it's kind of a trade-off. I think all these are actually too close together. So now you end up with, something like that. So these are actually probably starting here, actually it's a little too close. And maybe it visually looks too close because the other ones are looser. But see, then you're ended up, because you're not lining these up to close in this gap, then you end up with the space here too. So, but let's do this. Let's just take part of this design and we are going to compare it with what my customer did, what we started with, and what I've cleaned up so far. Like I said, my design is not complete by no means. I still have quite a bit of work to fix it. I probably am only halfway through, maybe not even halfway through. So as you can see, it is a time-consuming process. I mean, this video is long only because I did explain quite a bit up front too. But again, if I was estimating my completion time from start to finish, I would probably say an hour for sure. Somewhere between 1 to 2 hours would take me to actually finish the design, showing you the way that I did it. Oh, please don't. Oh, it's going to lock up. is going to move this over here. I tried to copy it, but there's just too many circles and stuff going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take mine and I am going to move the background. I don't know how I got multiple. Okay. I am going to turn it to all one color. I'm going to group it. G. More circles you have in an area for your program, longer it's going to take to process things. So a lot of times what you'll see is I have multiple tabs up because this is probably okay. Sometimes if you have too much going on, it will cause the program to crash. So if you are doing a lot, sometimes copy and paste things into a new tab. You'll save yourself a lot of heartache, because if this crashes and it didn't auto-save to a certain point, you got to start all over again. So I'm going to change this to black. Everything is moving really slow here. Okay. I don't know what's going on here. Looks like it double filled or something over here. Not quite sure. Maybe because I had those two copies, something just didn't go right with that end. But anyways, that wasn't part of what I cleaned up anyways. Now, these do have red cut lines around them, so the circles that I filled in with the SS6 do not have the red cut lines, so those are actually why they're standing out a little bit more. Okay, but as you can see, just the top part of the design that I cleaned up, how much clearer it is. So it, you know, even when you look at this fill here, if you had these two designs side by side, I would think that the majority of you would prefer this fill after it's been cleaned up over something like this. And I guarantee your customer would too. So, let's see. I don't think there's really anything else in this video. Like I said, I'm going to show you in a second video another possible way, and it's a little bit more advanced, on how I might fill in this, the S and the P, the letters, these smaller letters, and the N. I would probably just take with what I started with. The other option I'm going to show you is a little bit more controlled, but also it will be all the same thickness. Okay, so it will only work by changing this design to make it the S and the P all one thickness. Okay, but so I appreciate anybody who stuck with me towards the end. I don't even know how long this video is, but I just wanted to kind of show you the steps that I would to complete a full design, and you know, along with all these other little random tips that I'm giving you. And all these random tips are things that you would actually learn to do what I did today. Okay, it's about putting all the pieces of the puzzle together in order to work and complete a design. It's never going to be, okay, you need to start with this step and you need to end with this step, because the steps that are in between are going to be in different orders and different things to do based on artwork that we're using. So sometimes we can let our programs do some work for us, and sometimes we have to step in and do the work for the program. That's just the way it is. You will not learn that all in one class, okay? So that's why I have decided to break down my videos into tips. You can get comfortable learning, working with different tools and doing certain steps, and then that way you can apply them to the design that you're working on. So I hope you like this video. If you do, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see any future videos, please hit the subscribe button, and thanks for watching.